So just to introduce myself, my name is Katie Wysocki, and I serve as the Assistant Director in the Career Enrichment Network here in the College of the Liberal Arts. You're welcome to reach out to me after the presentation if you have any questions about those upcoming events or our career coaching appointments. Today we have wonderful alumni who have joined us to share their experience specifically with USAID and their background as well and what led to that career. I'm going to start with Tiara. She is a communications specialist supporting USAID's Bureau for Policy Planning and Learning as an institutional contractor. Tiara supports USAID by producing internal and external communication materials, event planning, and marketing campaigns to enhance awareness of agency objectives among the development community. Tiara holds a BA in journalism from Howard University and a master's in international affairs from Penn State University. Gretchen joined the U.S. Agency for International Development Middle East Bureau in January of 2021, where she serves as Deputy Director for Religious and Ethnic Minorities Programs. From 2017 to 2020, Gretchen was the Deputy Assistant Administrator in the Europe and Eurasia Bureau. In this capacity, she led U.S. development policy in the Western Balkans and a portfolio of bilateral and regional programs in democracy and governance, energy security, and economic growth. Ms. Burkle brings more than 25 years of leadership and management experience in both the public and private sectors to her work in international development. Prior to USAID, Ms. Burkle served 16 years overseas and at Washington, D.C. headquarters with the International Republican Institute, a nonpartisan nonprofit organization dedicated to advancing democracy. At IRI, Gretchen advanced the Institute's first global initiatives on women and youth, served as Chief of Party in Kabul, Afghanistan, and Deputy Director of the Eurasia and Middle East North Africa Regional Divisions, among other leadership positions. Ms. Burkle graduated from Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies with a master's in arts in Soviet studies and international economics, and from the Pennsylvania State University with a BA in international politics and a minor in Russian area studies. Brianna joined USAID Africa Bureau Health Team as the Africa Regional HIV/AIDS Advisor in 2016. Brianna supports the agency's work with the U.S. President's Emergency Plan for AIDS relief, focused primarily in Southern Africa. Prior to joining USAID, Brianna worked for the Department of State for 5 years in various roles as the acting PEPFAR coordinator in Uganda, deputy PEPFAR coordinator in Botswana, and as a multilateral diplomacy advisor in Washington, D.C. with the Office of the Global AIDS Coordinator. Before joining the State Department, Brianna earned her Master of International Affairs degree and served as a Peace Corps volunteer working with the Early Childhood Care Development Centers at Booth, sorry. Brianna received her Bachelor of Science in Psychology degree from the Pennsylvania State University and spent 1 semester studying on a ship while circumnavigating the globe. Sorry, I tripped over that last. But thank you all for being here. I appreciate so much. So for the students in the audience, we are going to open up the questions for you. I will moderate them. You can put them in the Q&A and we'll focus there. But first of all, I'd love for our panelists to tell a little bit about their current role and some helpful advice for our students here on the line. Gretchen, you're first on my panel if you would like to start.
Sure, thank you. Thanks so much, Katie. I'm so happy to be here. And I brought with me an relic. It's 35 years old, my Penn State coffee mug, because I'm a 1986 graduate. So I wanted to share that with everyone, how time flies. I just thought I would touch on sort of 3 points briefly. So perhaps just an overview of my career, and then just some options as I see in international development. And Brianna has this great background already at the State Department, and she can talk a lot about that. And Tiara, your experience, I think, will be so helpful for everyone to hear. And then third, I just have just some tips I thought I would share. So just briefly, I was very fortunate to know in high school that I really wanted to study international affairs. And I somehow at that point already had thought, and I want to get my master's in Russian studies. So 2 points on that. My mother said, a liberal arts degree, what kind of skill are you going to have? I'll circle back around to skills in a moment. I love that story. Love my mother, but she has always struggled with that. And then secondly, about this component of a master's degree as well. Um, so really choosing Penn State for me was a super easy natural fit because they have a great Russia area studies program to start with. And after graduation, I did move to Washington, D.C., because that's where a lot of the international jobs are focused. I would say there are some centers of the country where you can find those pockets: Boston, New York, D.C., California, maybe for the Asia region, for example. And actually, my first job was working at a graduate school. And so that was Johns Hopkins SAIS. That wasn't really where I had planned to attend, but I was working there. My first job out of Penn State was as an admin assistant, but it was my foot in the door to an awesome career. And that's where it all began. And so that's one of the tips I would like to bring up later, is it's often important just to have your foot in the door. After working at Johns Hopkins SAIS, I eventually enrolled there and then got my master's degree at SAIS in what was then Soviet studies. After that, I found a job at a export magazine, a magazine working on export. And I was an editor and wrote about exporting to the former Soviet Union and Europe. After that, the magazine went bankrupt. And so I found a job at a public policy agency that was connected to the magazine. And I was doing energy and environment work. But I was getting further and further away from the international that I had really set my sights on, and then switched to work on Capitol Hill, where I worked for a senator from Pennsylvania. I did that for a few years and literally saw a position for the International Republican Institute in a newspaper, a one ad, focused on Ukraine. And that's what I had done some of my academic work on. And so I jumped at the chance for that. And it's really at that point where I feel like I launched my career in international development. And then we can talk maybe in questions and answers about how that went and what I've done since that time. But that's just an overview to really get to one of my tips, which is you can't be afraid to change, and you have to go where the opportunities are. And sometimes after graduation, it could take a few false starts until you find that path forward. The second thing I wanted to mention, over the past 24 years or so in the international development field, there are lots of different options to think about. USAID is a fantastic organization, and I'm just thrilled to be doing what I am doing. And in the chat box, as Katie mentioned, there's lots of different ways to consider entry into USAID, and we can talk about that. But international development is super broad. There's the public health component that Brianna will talk about, which is, an extraordinary way to look at international development. There's humanitarian assistance, which is food security and safety. And there's a whole set of organizations that do that. There's the government, which we're all involved with and talking about today. There's the private sector, like the NGO I was working with before. So there's really a wide range, and I'm happy to talk more about that as well. And then third and finally, just some of the tips. Going back to what my mom said about, but what kind of skill do you have? I think one of my main tips is you have to really know yourself. You really have to think about, when you're thinking about careers, what skills do you bring to the table and what do you like to do? Are you a people person? Do you want to be interacting with people all day long? Are you a writer? And do you perhaps want to be quiet and be thinking and be writing a lot? And those skills are really important. It's really valuable to know yourself and to know what you're comfortable doing. And then to find that perfect match with the perfect fit with the job. And that could take a few tries. And that's what happened in my case. It took a few tries with different jobs till I really felt like I found that perfect marriage for my skill set and my passions. And I'm super fortunate that I can be doing that right now. That's my other tip is don't be afraid to change. Do you want a career that's sort of with one organization for the rest of your life? Or are you comfortable jumping around and finding different options and seeing what comes with that change? That's something you need to consider. And third and finally, my favorite tip is actually from Martha Stewart, of all people, who said, surround yourself with people who are having fun at what they're doing. And I think that is just so key. You really want to be working. Work is work. I mean, that's why they call it work. You want to be with people who are enjoying what they're doing, who are respectful and positive, and in my case, who are really mission driven and mission oriented. So those are all things you have to really stop and consider as you look at the work you're doing. So I'll leave it with that, and I'll turn it to my colleagues over at USAID. Thanks very much. Oops, Katie, I think you were on mute.
I thought I clicked it. Tiara, would you like to go next? I'm making
Sure.
my way down my screen.
Okay. So I would say that around 9/11, that's when I knew I wanted to do communication. So there was a lot of stuff in the media about, about the attacks and like how the Muslim community was being communicated. And I felt like at that time, that's when journalism kind of took like a downhill, where I felt like journalists weren't being objective and fair. It was really about, saying outrageous things to sit here and get more clicks or more advertising for people to go to their website. So if you fast forward to like 2010, I was getting my bachelor's from Howard University. And like halfway throughout my program, I was like, wait, I think I want to pursue international affairs. And then I also might deal with the fact that my family is Jamaican. So I travel to Jamaica all the time and like see my grandfather. And there was just huge disparity between what I was had in the US and what my grandfather had lacked in Jamaica. And so what I did was, okay, I was getting my degree in communications, but I felt like I didn't have that international affairs background. And being from DC, living in DC, I had the opportunity to intern at a bunch of different organizations because DC is the hub of international affairs, of government, of political science. So I just started interning. I interned at the State Department, the Wilson Center, Voice of America, and like the list goes on. And then after that, I was okay. I took a year off of school and I was like, wait, I got my communications degree, but I don't have a degree in international affairs. Like, how is this going to translate when I look for my job? So I took a year off of school and applied to SIA, did the program for 2 years. And then actually I have to give a great shout out to Grant as a career advisor. So after we graduated, SIA and Grant specifically would keep track of students that were employed and unemployed. And he made sure to send us opportunities. So I remember Grant sent me this opportunity that came from a contractor of USAID saying, hey, I think you should apply. This is what they're looking for. I applied for the job. I had an interview, and within a month, I started at USAID as a communication assistant. So I definitely have to shout out Grant for that opportunity and for passing that along. So I was at USAID for 2 years as a communication assistant, and the opportunity at Booz Allen opened up as a consultant. So I left USAID and then I came immediately back. There is nothing like USAID's atmosphere, people. It really feels like home. I have a sense of belonging here. So I came back as a communication specialist and now I work in the Bureau for PPL. Another thing that I forgot to mention is I didn't have any overseas like travel abroad experience. So actually after I graduated SIA, I went to Mexico City for 6 months and I worked at a nonprofit helping refugees and migrants seek asylum. So it was another thing I did to boost my resume. My advice, honestly, for you all, and it goes back to what Gretchen mentioned, is to definitely figure out what is your niche. So I always knew that I want to do communication. So that is my niche, but you can do comms for like global health, humanitarian assistance, education, economic growth. And then I also suggest you to keep entering at different organizations because think tanks and nonprofits in the U.S. government, their operations, the way that they do things are different. So you need to figure out what organization is best suited for you. And another thing I think I would highlight is, for me, I had no luck finding a job through USAID jobs. I've been an institutional contractor for the last few years. A lot of people at USAID, like 30% of our workforce, are institutional contractors, and they've done it for 10 plus years. So I definitely don't want you to limit yourself to look at contract companies as well, because there are a lot of positions within the US government. And that's all I have. And I'm happy to share a list of contractors that work specifically with USAID if you guys want to reach out to me through LinkedIn, or I can give you my email later on.
Thank you. Thank you, Brianna, for sticking with us and navigating your phone. I know it's awkward.
No problem. Thanks for the opportunity. So I'll just start with a little bit about my story and then try to add to the great advice that my two colleagues have already shared. So my story, I joined Peace Corps right out of college and returned from 2 years abroad, really knowing that I wanted to continue to work in international development from my experiences living and working in Butibute, Lesotho. No problem. But I had also, I left Lesotho with a lot of questions about geopolitical dynamics and how donor funding decisions get made and executed, and all these questions from my experiences there about how that plays out in cities and communities in lower income countries. Since I knew I wanted to stay in international development and so many of those organizations are in DC, I had thought that I had narrowed down far enough that I wanted to sort of work in health, and I wanted to find a job in DC. And as I started doing research and looking at positions, I noted that most needed a master's degree and everybody in DC is highly overeducated. So that's when I decided to join the School of International Affairs, partly to check this master's box, but also to explore a lot of those questions that I was sitting with coming out of Peace Corps. And so since I knew I wanted to leverage that into a position in DC, I started early in my first year looking for internships and sort of doing research on job sites. And I managed to land an internship with the State Department, and it was in the office of the Global AIDS Coordinator that manages all of our US government investments in HIV worldwide and manages the PEPFAR program. And looking back, that was really sort of a pivotal opportunity in my career, since I've been working on PEPFAR for the last 10 years in various roles with the State Department and now with USAID. I joined USAID in 2016. So I sit in the Africa Bureau. I'm in the Africa Regional HIV/AIDS Advisor, and I advise our USAID leadership on policy around PEPFAR, sort of the process of planning and executing HIV/AIDS programs, and then supporting our USAID mission staff in countries across the African continent, but mostly in Southern Africa. And like Tiara mentioned, I've been an institutional contractor for the last 10 years, but recently transitioned to a direct hire role with the US government. So I can talk a bit more about that if folks are interested in hearing more about that. And just to add to some of the great advice so far, I mean, languages is a huge thing that everybody's looking for, is having languages. Experience abroad is another huge plus for your resume. There are, I would say, sort of 3 different ways that you could look into working with USAID or for USAID. Tiara mentioned USAID Jobs is one, institutional contractor websites is a second one. And then the way USAID does their work is we have US government funds that we then give to implementing partners. So there's a lot of partners that are headquartered in DC and then also have offices around the world. And those partners are using USAID funding to execute programs. There's a lot of health funding out there with these partners to execute programs. So another way to work with USAID is to work with one of those implementing partners, because that is one thing that if you can talk about that in an interview with USAID is like a really great thing to be able to talk about. Working with a partner, you know, USAID policies, you'll be working on USAID grants. So that's another way to eventually maybe make your way into USAID. I'll stop there.
Well, thank you all very much for the wonderful advice and the overview. I do have a few questions that have come in as everyone was speaking. So I'll start with Caroline. She says, hi, everyone. Thank you for sharing your experiences with us. I'm Caroline, and just like Tiara, I hold a bachelor's degree in communications, and I'm currently pursuing a master's degree in international affairs. My question is regarding the foreign service vacancy with USAID. I have been thinking of applying, but the required years of experience are making me hesitant to apply. What would you suggest I do to get my foot in the door? I also travel abroad to figure out, whoops, I think that's your advice here. I'm so sorry. So what advice do you have for Caroline?
Maybe I'll just jump in. I've seen some of those advertisements myself in USAjobs.gov for the Foreign Service. There are tricks to applying for jobs listed on USAjobs.gov. There's some of that is online. There are tips and tricks to be successful with that. One of them is to match your actual words in your resume to the actual job announcement. Because a little trick is that all the resumes first go through a computer in North Carolina before there's a big weeding out process before they even go before a live person. And so you want to make sure you pass that first cut. The foreign service positions that are listed for USAID are not just entry level. There are some of them are really looking for a few years of experience. And so I do need to note that. And so there's different kinds of foreign service officers that USAID is currently looking for. Some is more like on the financial side of things, contracting officers. Some are more sort of boutique, like private sector engagement officers or democracy officers. And so you would want to marry a few years of experience to that. That being said, you should always try. I mean, don't ever hesitate to try to apply. And it's also important to sort of, there's USAID. So as you understand, there's foreign service, obviously, for the State Department. There's lots of foreign service. The Agriculture Department has a foreign service. So foreign service is really a category of personnel and a few different agencies. There's the Foreign Commercial Service. So the Department of Commerce has a foreign service. I don't want to steer people away from USAID because I think it's the best agency in government, but just to highlight that there's different options for folks when you look at the foreign service. And there's definitely lots of guidance out there on how to apply for those jobs.
Thank you. Staying on the keeping on an application process type trend, I have a student that's also from School of International Affairs who is scheduled to graduate in May. How long is the application process with USAID?
Is this for like, and so anything through USA Jobs, I don't know about, but for institutional contractor, the job application is fairly simple. They might just ask for, your resume, some references, whether you have a secret clearance or not, and you send it over to the contractor. It's really a short-term thing.
Is there, how about going into depth, is there a level of clearance within these positions of USAID?
Yeah, so for anything at USAID, the lowest level you would need would be a secret clearance. So if you actually know for a fact that you want to work for the government, federal government, I would really highly suggest that you try to secure an internship at one of the government agencies like State Department or USAID. And that way they can start your background clearance and you get an interim clearance so that when you do apply for a job, all that background work has been done. A lot of times I've been seeing that some of these jobs that are advertised, they already want someone with a secret clearance. So if you start the process of getting that going, that's a better chance for you to get hired.
Good point.
Yeah, I think it's much faster on the institutional contractor side. I know that on the applying for a direct hire position can take longer because of clearances, up to 6-8 months if you're starting a clearance from scratch.
Another question came through, Tiara, specifically for you. How would you say your international experience in Mexico helped to boost your resume, i.e. skills and connections? And would you say working with different sectors in the international affairs area helped focus your interests? What were some, there's a lot of pieces to this, what were some notable experiences that helped make this decision? So specifically for you, but also what for all of you, you felt how you boosted your resume throughout your career to continue your career journey.
Yeah, so for Mexico, I had took Spanish like all throughout school, and I swear I couldn't speak a lick of it until I got to Mexico. So that was helpful. But now that I'm back, I don't use it anymore. So I lost that language skills. But for me, it's the fact that like the way that USAID is split up is we have like headquarters in DC, which is where we all work, but we also have locations in the missions. So for me, I felt like in Mexico, I was able to do somewhat of mission work because I was actually like working with the refugees. I was like meeting them. I was helping them do their resumes. I even accompanied some of them to like the Office of like Migration in Mexico to help them seek asylum and do paperwork. So it's really that hands-on experience that I think that USAID likes to have, to know that I can be out in the field, but I can also be in headquarters in DC.
Sorry, Brianna, if I interrupted you. Sorry, I would just say I studied Russian at Penn State and then in grad school, and that absolutely contributed to my career path and the jobs that I was able to get. I hadn't yet really spent a lot of time overseas in the region before I got my job, but having the academic background of what I studied definitely contributed. But over the years, as I was able to travel and work in these countries, that's definitely contributed to new opportunities for sure.
I'm going to plug Peace Corps. A lot of people at USAID say USAID is Peace Corps for grown-ups. So I would plug Peace Corps. There's a lot of Peace Corps volunteers at USAID. It's a natural network that you will jump into if you do Peace Corps. It's also a great experience just living and working in a community. You get such in-depth understanding about the challenges, the successes, all the real just innovations and exciting things that are going on in communities around the world. So I would plug that. If that's not something you can do for whatever personal reasons, I know it's sometimes really hard to get experience overseas and people struggle with that. I would advise that you try to work locally in either the sector you're interested in, with local community organizations or marginalized groups in the United States, because a lot of the issues we face internationally are issues that we have here domestically too. And so even if you can't get abroad, you can get some experience working with certain populations in the United States that you can leverage and talk about and have stories and experiences with that you can talk to in interviews and that kind of thing. So even volunteer work with the sectors and organizations that you're interested in working with or for is a good idea.
Oh, sorry, can I add something else? So when after grad school, I said I didn't have any international affairs experience. So that's why I went abroad to Mexico City. So there's this faith-based organization. There are actually a couple of them that help young adults go to different countries and like be like a companion to people in need. And so I actually went to Mexico City like free of charge, and I can drop the link to that organization that helps do that. But for me, I swore up and down that I want to be a foreign service officer until I went to Mexico for 6 months. It is amazing that you can dedicate your time to go travel every like 2 to 3 years, but I feel like for me, more short-term travel was better for me. So that's why I suggested that, you figure that out now before you commit to being like a foreign service officer, because you don't want any complications in the end. But I will definitely drop that link to different organizations that allow you to travel without paying any cost. And it was faith-based, but it was through the Lutheran church. I'm not Lutheran, but they were really just like letting like anybody at the time send an application and go. So I'll drop that in the link as well.
Thank you for sharing that, Brianna. I'm gonna go back to the Peace Corps. We've had a couple of questions drop specifically to that. One being, I'm a current junior interested in joining the Peace Corps or AmeriCorps. you have any advice for students interested in this position? And then the second question from another student was, do you see people going into Peace Corps after grad school? So how does an undergrad prepare? And is there an opportunity for grad students to consider that?
Yes, both undergrad and grad school, you can apply anytime in your life. As an adult, as a retiree, we had retirees in my group as well. And what was the other question?
Sorry, how do you, what advice do you have for students interested in Peace Corps or AmeriCorps?
When I applied to Peace Corps, you submitted one application, and based on your experience in your resume, they would place you in a position. And so you had to be open to going anywhere in the globe. But I believe now Peace Corps is set up a little bit differently, where you can apply to a specific country and you can apply to a specific position. So from, the front end perspective, that's really exciting for people who know what they want to do, and then they can apply directly to those positions. I think volunteer experience is great for your resume if you're trying to apply to Peace Corps. As much volunteer experience as you can get. I worked in a daycare and with kids going into Peace Corps, and that's how I was placed, working with these early childhood centers and sort of preschools in Lesotho. So they saw that on my resume and linked that directly to that specific position, because that's some of the experience that I brought to the table. So I think they will be looking at sort of what basis of experience you have and how could you contribute in a position. So if you can see those positions, I haven't been to the Peace Corps website in a while, but if you can see those positions and find something that you think matches your experience, maybe that would help.
I will say too that Penn State's fortunate enough to have a Peace Corps recruiter on campus. So I shared, there's a lot of information going in the notes or in the chat. So make sure everybody's pulling all those great links. But Andrew is the Peace Corps recruiter, and he will have some great information on what is going on right now with their recruitment and the application process, and can help you with that as well. The last I had spoke to him, they were still taking applications, but there was some backlog in placing people who had applied before the pandemic, and then obviously bringing new people in as well. So Grant, I saw your hand up. Would you like to say something too?
I was going to make the same pitch that you did. The students should connect with Andrew on Peace Corps opportunities. And just to follow up on what Brianna said, the application system now is position specific. So you look for countries, but also roles within countries that you think you're a good fit for, and apply that way.
Great. Thank you. I'm glad we're on the same page. So for the students, thank you so much for putting wonderful questions in. I would suggest making sure you're using the Q&A box for questions. There's a lot of information in the chat right now, and I'm trying to dig through and make sure we get everything. Actually, Grant, I see a question from you, so I'll defer to that one. Do any panelists have advice on programs like Presidential Management Fellowships, the Boren Scholarship, Fulbright, or Critical Language Scholarships as a route in? He's thinking about the importance of non-competitive hiring eligibility. I will say too, for the students who are here, our Lunch and Learn in April will be focused on the academic programs in the State Department too. So there's a link there for you to attend again. And I'll turn it over to one of our panelists if you'd like to speak to those programs at all.
I might just jump in if that's okay. I know several folks who've gone through the PMF program. 35 years ago was the Presidential Management Internship Program. It's now the Presidential Management Fellowship Program. They're now finishing a 35-year career in government and have had fantastic careers. And I also currently work with some PMFs. It's a fantastic, great organization. It's a great way to get into the government, not just USAID, but all of the US government. The other options listed are great options too. There's one that I really wanted to flag for USAID, and it's the Payne Fellowships. And USAID is really focused on pushing this. And quite frankly, if I had known about this when I was graduating, it didn't exist then, but if it had been, it's definitely something I would have jumped at. It's super interesting. It's open to all US citizens, but it's connected to grad school. So you have to be, you sort of work it so you apply for the fellowship and grad school at the same time, and it helps your entry into grad school. And then the fellowship includes internships in the US, in Washington, DC with USAID, and then also an internship at a US embassy overseas. So you gain this overseas experience while you're in the fellowship. And then afterward, it's entry into USAID. So those are all in the links. There's a whole list of these different fellowship options that are listed in that website that I sent, usaid.gov/careers. It's all listed, and there's some really fascinating, great opportunities for entry into USAID via these different kind of organizations or fellowships.
Yeah, I would have to echo what Gretchen said. One of my classmates I graduated from FIA in 2017, he got through the PMF program and he was working at USDA, and then now he's working in the State Department. A couple other people that I work with now in my bureau are part of the Payne Fellowship. There's also another fellowship, I don't know if anyone mentioned, but it's called the Charles B. Rangel International Affairs Program, and it's facilitated through my alma mater, Howard University, as well. So I can drop that link, and I think that's definitely another opportunity for you to travel abroad and get experience, and also like be based here in the US, if that's not on your radar.
I can't see the chat, but I think Gretchen put in the link at the USAID.gov site with all of these fellowships, hopefully. But there's also the Franklin Fellows and the AAAS fellowships as well. Those are also good fellowships to apply for. But I just want to say I applied for a PMF, Presidential Management Fellowships, and I didn't get in. I was rejected, sadly.
Neither did I.
So just so you know, that you can still have a career with the US government, even if you don't get a PMF.
We appreciate that positivity. I believe at the end in Zoom, I can pull all of the chat conversation and condense everything and send it out to the students who are on today to make sure you have everything in one area. Grant, did I see your hand again? I don't want to.
Just very quickly, I was going to follow up both on Payne and Rangel and Pickering as well. Payne is very specific around getting employed by USAID. So there's pretty much a guarantee that if you make it through the Payne program, that you will have a job waiting for you at USAID at the end of it. Rangel and the Pickering Fellowship are comparable programs to get into the State Department. So there's an initial choice. Do I want to go down the USAID road, or do I want to go down the State Department road? But they're all great programs. They're fully paid graduate programs for graduate studies with the guarantee of employment at the end of it.
Thank you. So some of the another question we have from student, thank you for waiting for me. Hearing about your experiences is exciting and insightful. I am currently an undergrad at Penn State studying history and economics. Brianna mentioned the education level of many in DC pursuing international development. Do many people receive their master's and then enter the workforce? Does anyone enter the workforce and then go to grad school? Brianna, I don't know if you'd like to start with that.
Definitely both. I've seen both. I know some people who are doing it concurrently. They're working full-time and going to grad school at night. Some people join for a few years, kind of hone what it is they're interested in from a few years of experience working. And they're like, actually, I want to do what that person's doing. So I'm going to go get this kind of master's degree. So if you're a little bit undecided, maybe working a few years would help sort of zero in on what you would want to study as a master's.
Thank you. Appreciate that. I think the investment of a master's degree is obviously a financial burden for most. You know, I know myself, it was a huge decision. So knowing clearly what it is you want to do can be helpful before making that financial investment. Second part is, and maybe you could just provide some background or definition. The question is, can you talk more about the USAID partners? Who are those groups and how often do people go from USAID to a job with a partner program? Whoever'd like to take that.
I can start. Am I talking too much?
No.
I know I'm more familiar with the global health partners. So, like Family Health International, Population Services International, Johns Hopkins University. There's a whole list that I can probably pull offline of past or current USAID partners in the global health arena, and then you can go on and explore their websites. So I can get that to you, Catherine.
And sure, thank you. I might just flag the bulk of my career has been with an implementing partner, and there's all the different sectors you have to think about. So, Brianna is describing great expertise in the field of global health. There's the humanitarian assistance side. So you think of like Mercy Corps or Lutheran Relief Services or Catholic Relief Services, or there's a whole bunch on that side. I was in the democracy and governance space. So there's not just IRI, there's National Democratic Institute, our sister organization. And a good place to look at for the partner side of things is called DevEx. I think it's devex.com or devex.org. Fantastic website, great job site, I should add too. And that is just, I think it's a really useful place to look because you really learn about what the different organizations are and who's doing what. So I always recommend that to people who are interested in looking at it from the partner side. And there is, I think it's harder to go from an implementing partner into USAID because it's actually kind of tricky to get into government, I have found. It's easier to go from the government into the private sector because there's just fewer hurdles to do so. You don't need the security clearance. There aren't all the different mechanisms, hiring mechanisms, which can be kind of complicated to maneuver. So going back the other way is a little bit easier, I'd say.
Great, and Grant has just added the link to the chat box as well to the DevEx. So thank you for doing that. A fun question. A student, it's a first-year student, and asking advice and navigating the college career with the hopes of a future career journey into state or USAID. Looking back on your own undergraduate career, is there anything you're glad you did, you wish you did, you would love to do again, that you can share with our first-year student and others on the call today? Gretchen, I'll start with you because I have you up.
Thanks, sure. And this sort of fits with a few things we've talked about. I really have thought hard when I was at school and very closely considered trying to do a junior year abroad. But financially, it was just really out of my reach because there were, financial implications to that. So I really wasn't able to get that overseas experience while I was at school. And so if you can do that, and if you can find a way to make that affordable, I really recommend that if you want to go down the path of international development. And as Tiara said, I really considered the Foreign Service, but I soon found out from my initial experience of work overseas, I didn't really want to be posted overseas all the time. I like kind of being in Washington, which is a fabulous city. And so I feel very fortunate that I've been able to find the balance of a job that affords the travel and allows the travel. But I'm posted here. So I'd offer that.
Brianna?
She stole mine. International opportunities for semesters or years abroad is a huge, just great opportunity when you're in undergrad or in grad school. There's also a lot of grants out there that you can get to fund things like that. So I would look into that if financing is an issue, which it usually is. yeah, I did a semester at sea. It's where you take courses on a ship and you visit countries all around, you circumnavigate the globe, which was just like this amazingly pivotal moment in my life that opened my eyes to the world and the globe. And I really think that's why I'm working in international development right now. And why I did Peace Corps, actually. And then what else was I going to add? Oh, I think doing an SIA at Penn State is also really great because the university is so huge, and I did a lot of electives outside of the School of International Affairs with the engineering department, and I took an epidemiology course because I knew I wanted to work in health. So getting those 500 level courses outside of SIA and being able to take those sort of very specialized courses, even when your graduate degree is more generalized, I found as a really great opportunity at Penn State.
Okay, me next.
Yes.
Yeah, so for me as a freshman, how many years ago was that? I honestly, so for me, like back at Howard, my counselors just always instilled that like we need to intern, and like it doesn't matter like where, like you just, need to get your foot in the door. You need to have experience, you need to have something on your resume, and it teaches you like real life world experience. So that's like my biggest suggestion, is to really like intern and just figure it out. I would also like to echo what Brianna said, is even I knew I wanted to do comms, so I got the master's in international affairs, but like my second year, I was never in the CAT building. I was taking all my courses at the comms building and got to like build good relationships with my professor. That actually at one point, I actually went to South Africa when I was at Penn State getting my master's for a week during spring break. They're through I think the Skyers like honor college. Yeah, I went to South Africa. That was cool too.
Thank you all. Great advice. And I love, as a first year student, you're here and attending this event. I think those are kudos to you for collecting information and knowledge now. A general question for everyone. Are you currently living abroad or in the US? Through all your careers with USAID, have you spent a lot of time abroad, either moving from place to place with different positions or establishing yourself in one place for a long time? So Gretchen, you alluded to this in the previous question.
Yes, it really is. I'm based in DC, but I have been able to travel a lot to the countries that I oversee, the regions that I've been working in. So first in the Balkans, and I'm brand new in the Middle East. And so unfortunately with COVID, no travel yet, but that's part of the plan for moving forward. And it's really something I think unique about AID. There's lots of opportunities to work overseas because our missions, our missions are connected to the embassies, need support quite frequently. And so you can find opportunities to do long-term, they're called TDYs, temporary tours of duty, where you can serve overseas in one of our missions. And so I was able to do that 2 years ago and spend several months in Macedonia because they just needed someone to fill in. And so that's why I think it's sort of interesting at AID. They have a variety of opportunities like that. If you're not part of the Foreign Service, but just, as someone who's outside of the Foreign Service, there's lots of ways to travel or spend longer time overseas.
Should I go next? I did 2 years at the State Department in DC, and then I did 2 years in Botswana. I lived in Botswana and worked for the State Department. I was actually hired through an institutional contractor with the CDC, and then seconded to work in the State Department's coordination office. So it can get pretty complicated, but I was technically working for the State Department in Botswana. And then I did a short term, sort of 3-4 months in Uganda as well, filling in for a gap. There was a vacancy. And so I was sort of sent there to work for 3 or 4 months to fill a vacancy gap as well. And now I'm back in DC.
Do you all find that the more you take advantage of those opportunities to fill a gap or to travel or saying yes to those opportunities, the further it projects your career and opportunities and network. Probably answering my own question with that, pointing out, say yes.
Yep, absolutely. You know, my advice is walk through every open door. Definitely. Open yourself to all the opportunities. There's a lot out there, and it really does, it builds all the layers, really build, and you can really tap into things that happen over your career. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I was hired, I started that internship at the State Department, and I was hired on as an intern after. So my salary was very low to begin with in DC, which is a pretty expensive city to live in. So working my way up from there in DC would have taken quite a long time. And I actually applied to the position in Botswana, which I think was very scary at the time to sort of pick up and move overseas. But I sort of took this leap of faith, and it wound up doubling my salary, like kind of overnight, just because it was an opportunity that probably less people applied for. And in DC, it's so very competitive. But taking that risk and leap of faith and moving there 100% propelled my career further, faster.
I would also like to add that I feel like in general, relationships are super important as well. Like if someone knows your work ethic and vouch for you and there's an opportunity on your team, they're more like open to have you take the opportunity. There was someone that I started working at USAID. He was an intern. They brought him on full time as an institutional contractor, and he just built relationships. He would take on projects like that were higher level to the point where he actually supports the front office. And he was able to take that leap in that short term within like 2 years.
I just wanted to underscore Tiara's, that's a great point, relationship building. So it's not just these opportunities, but every opportunity, really take advantage of every opportunity to build those relationships. Tiara, I think that's a great, great point.
For the liberal arts undergrad students on the call, just a reminder that we have the Alumni Mentor Program too, especially for our first year and sophomore students that are gaining more information on future careers. Please apply for the program, and we can connect you with an alumni that's working in the field to help you to create that network and to understand what that future might look like, and to continue to come to these events too, to build your network and take advantage of those Penn State resources. I do have one more question in the Q&A right now. Thank you for all the information you all have shared today. I was wondering if a law degree focused on human rights would also be transferable and comparable to a master's degree in this field. Thoughts on a law degree?
Katie, I'm gonna have to jump off right at 4:30.
Okay.
So I have another briefing that popped up
Sure.
on my calendar today.
Sure.
But I think a law degree is a great idea, and there's lots of opportunities in the international development field for that.
Thank you.
And definitely to tap into it. So of course, USAID has its own general counsel office. And so we have lawyers who are involved in our programs and help oversee them. And one of our lawyers I know is at Georgetown right now on helping design a degree in international development law. So it's an up and coming combination.
Thank you. I know the time is coming close, and I appreciate the students and all your wonderful questions, and I'm glad we were able to get through all of them. Again, if there's any information in the chat you wanted to grab, I will do my best to try and get that out to those that attended and registered today as well. I do want to say in my tripping over the bio for Brianna, I did forget to mention that all our panelists are here in their personal capacity, and we so appreciate your experience and your advice based on your experience with USAID and sharing that with us today, and your gracious donation of your time. So thank you all so much for being here, and I very much appreciate it. Is there anything anyone would like to add in the end?
if you still have questions about how to navigate your career, honestly, please reach out to me on LinkedIn. I will take time to talk to you and like help you, map out or guide your career. I definitely want to see you get to where you are, because you all deserve it. You're all working hard. So, and we need more people to help us with international affairs. It's just a growing field. So yeah.
Thank you so much. I very much appreciate that.
Ditto for me. Thanks so much for the opportunity and good luck, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us.
Yes, 3 ways. Thank you very much. Good luck, everyone.
Thank you so much. And for the students on the line, this is why you attend these wonderful information sessions with our great and generous alumni. Thank you again. And the recording will be available on the YouTube channel for the Career Enrichment Network. If anyone has any questions, feel free to follow up with me. Thank you.